the eighth Torah, Likutei Moharan, and it's called Ra'iti Menorat Zahav. And we're in the eighth part of this Torah. And yesterday we ended off the shir by speaking about Rabbi Nachman. After he explained this whole Torah, he brought us this Gemara of Rabbi Bar Chana, where Rabbi Bar Chana speaks about, he recounts how this Arab merchant showed him the generation of the Midbar, the generation that died in the Midbar. And when he came and he saw them, they were lying flat on the ground, and they seemed like they were drunk. Their face was all flushed and all red. And they were so huge and they were so big that one of them, his knee was bent, and the Arab on his camel with his spear was able to walk underneath the knee and not even touch the knee. And then we learned how Rabbi Bar Chana cut off from the tchelet, from the tzitzit, and then his animal was not able to move. He wasn't able to move out of the walk away. So he went and so the Arab merchant told him, maybe you took something from here, because we have a tradition that anyone who takes something from here, from them, cannot move. And he said yes. So he went and he put back the piece of tchelet that he took, and then they were able to leave. So now we're going to see how Rabbi Nachman fits this Torah that we learned into these words. And so Rabbi Nachman does this in a lot of Torahs, and sometimes you can tell that it's absolutely not the simple understanding of the Gemara, and he just fits it into the words of the Gemara, or even the words of the Rashbam, like a drasha. And it almost seems like the Gemara or the Rashbam had not at all intended to what Rabbi Nachman is speaking about, because it seems so far from the simple understanding of it. But that doesn't matter. Either that was their intention and we're just not aware of it, and they had deeper intentions and beyond the simple understanding. That's one way of seeing it. Another way of seeing it is, even if it was not their intention, the point is that Rabbi Nachman finds all of this like it's like a vessel. All of this, that what he does when he brings these Gemaras and when he brings a lot of psukim, is it's a vessel in order to for us to remember. It's almost like a memory mechanism for us to remember all the different aspects and all the different points of the Torah. And he does that a lot. He actually reveals in a few places in the Sichot that all of his Torahs were not said from. It's not that he came to understand these deep understandings and these hasagot from the psukim that he brings in the Torah and from the Gemaras that he brings in the Torah. It's that through a very, very tremendous connection and tremendous dveikut and the tremendous levels of Ruach HaKodesh that he had, he would ascend and receive these tremendous understandings, these tremendous hasagot, and then he would come back down and try to find a place in the psukim and in the Gemaras in order to fit it in as a vessel for us to be able to understand it, almost like a mashal, almost like a metaphor. So all of these Gemaras and all of these psukim that are showing us, that are pointing to the deeper understanding that he's trying to give over, are really a, so to speak, a mashal, a metaphor for us. It's almost like a levush, it's a clothing for us to be able to receive these deep hasagot. And so that's why sometimes you're going to see in these Gemaras that he brings, it's not at all the simple understanding of it. So let's see how he does that here in this case. היינו שהראה לו הרשעים שאינם דבקים בצדיקים, והם נקראים מתי מדבר, כי מדבר לא הייתה רוח צפונית מנשבת בו. היינו בחינת רוח החיים בקדושה, שהיא בחינת רוח צפונית שהייתה מנשבת בכינור של דוד. So he says that when the Arab merchant was telling Rabbi Bar Chana, come and I will show you the generation of the Midbar, the generation that died in the desert, he was showing him the Rishaim that are not connected to the Tzaddikim. So this Torah is basically the whole Torah, this whole 8th Torah, speaking about, on the one side, he describes how the people that are connected to the Tzaddik, how they receive the breath of life, the breath of Hashem, that fulfills all of their needs and all of their wishes. Where on the other side, there are the people that are connected to the Rav of the Klippa, the Rav of Esav. And they also receive this breath of life, also to fulfill their needs and to fulfill their wishes. So this whole Torah is describing the difference between them. So here, now, we're going to see that described through this story. That when he says that he's going to show Rabbi Bar Mechana the generation that died in the desert, he's referring to, it's alluding to, the Rishaim that are not connected to the Tzaddikim. Why? How is that? So, those people are considered, those Rishaim are called those that died in the desert. Why is that? The Gemara in Yevamot says that the desert doesn't have, the northern wind does not blow in the desert. So what does the northern wind represent? At the beginning of this Torah, Rabbi Nachman spoke about how there is the kinor of David HaMelech, the harp that was on the bed of, on top of the bed, Lemala mimitato shel David HaMelech. On top of the bed of David HaMelech, there was this harp, and the chatzot, in the night, at midnight, there was this ruach tzfonit min hashevet bo. There was a northern wind that would come, and it would blow and would play the harp, and it would, and that's how David HaMelech would awaken and serve Hashem. So this ruach tzfonit, in the beginning of the story, Rabbi Nachman said, represents the breath of life, the breath of Hashem that fills up all the void. Okay. So here in the desert, where there is, you don't have that breath of life, you don't have the ruach tzfonit, you don't have the breath of Hashem. So that those people that died in the desert are alluding to the Rishaim that are not connected to this breath of Hashem. They're not connected. Okay, we said that they also get a breath that fills their void, but it's not considered the breath of Hashem. It's not considered the breath of life. Okay? And that's an important distinction, because up until now in the Torah, it sounds like, okay, both of them are the breath of life. One of them gets it through the tzaddik of the holiness, of the Rav of the Kedusha, the rabbi of the holiness, and one of them gets it from the Rav of the Tuma. One of them gets it from the other side. But now we can see clearly that even though they also receive a breath, a wind, a ruach, a spirit that fulfills all of their needs and all of their wishes, and through their rabbi, the rabbi of the Klippa, but that's not considered the ruach, that's not the breath of Hashem. Okay, that's called achoraim. That's called, comes from the back, okay, from the side of concealment. And it's indirect. So obviously all energy and all life, all comes from Hashem. Because they're receiving it in an indirect way, right, just like the Avodah Zarah, it's an indirect way, so that's why it's not at all connected to Hashem. Okay. היינו בחינת רוח החיים בקדושה שהיא בחינת רוח צפונית שהייתה מנשבת בכינור של דוד, והרשעים הללו שאינם דבקים בצדיקים ואין להם הרוח דקדושה והם בחייהם קרויים מתים, והראה לו מאיכן מגיע להם שלמות החיסרון, וזהו שהראה לו. So what does the Arab merchant want to show Rabbi Bar Mechana? He wants to show him, where do these Rishaim, these sinners that are not connected to the tzaddikim, everyone who lives their life in this physical world is always going to come across a time or an instance or circumstances or situations where they're going to be lacking something, they're going to be needing something, they're going to be wishing for something. So we do look around and we see Rishaim that also have their needs fulfilled. They have their wishes manifested. How do they get that if they're not connected to this Ruach Tzafon? Ruach Tzfonit, they're not connected to the northern wind, they're not connected to the breath of Hashem. So where do they get that from? Since they're not connected to the tzaddik. So that's what this Arab merchant is coming to show Rabbi Bar Mechana. Okay? Dahav odamu kimevasme, Perish Rabbeinu Shmuel kishtuye yain. בחינת עשב אדמוני שהוא הרב דקליפה אשר משם מקבלים הרשעים, הרוח חיים שלהם נשלים החיסרון. Okay, so he says, what were these dead, the generation that died in the midbar, what did they look like? The generation that died in the desert, they looked like they were drunk. So he says they look like they were drunk. What does that allude to? What is that hinting to? The fact that they were red, like the Rashbam explained, right? Their face was flushed and red, and their skin was rosy and red, like someone who's drunk. That's someone that drank a lot of wine. His body heat increases, and there is redness that you can see in his body and his face. And so that represents the fact that these Rishaim are connected to the Rav of Esav. We spoke about that Esav represents the color red. Esav who Admoni, okay, he's a redhead, and he represents the color red. He's represented by the color red, which is the color of all judgment. Dinim is also red, and the color of all the sins as well. And so that's what this point of the story, the point that in the description of these people that died in the midbar, they were like drunk, they were red, is that they are connected to the Rav of the Klippa. Viganu aparkid, they were lying flat on their backs. Perush Rabbeinu Shmuel, penehem lemala. Penehem ze bechinat haruach kanal, akarat penehem an netabam, v'hainu lemala. כי הרוח שלהם גדול לפי שעה, עד אשר עולה הצלחתם למעלה כנ"ל. בחינת כה צוררה ויפיח בהם כנ"ל. So he says that they were lying flat on their back. What is the Rashbam, Rabbeinu Shmuel? How does he explain, how did he describe the position that they were lying? They were lying on their back. He says their faces were upward. So what does that mean, their faces were upward? So Rabbi Nachman earlier in the Torah pointed out that how the face of a person is all concentrated, the most important feature in the face of a person is in the nose. And we see this in the halachot that in Mesechet, what was it? I think it was in Ketubot. About a woman whose husband was lost at sea. And so in order to remarry, she needs testimony, she needs witnesses that come back and they say, oh, we saw that they saw her husband, his dead body. And they need to be able to recognize his dead body. And so the way to recognize the dead body is if they saw the face, is through the nose. Okay? If that wasn't there, then they cannot recognize the body. They cannot recognize his face. So we see that the most important feature of a person's face is the nose. Okay? So this is because it is through the nose that Hashem blew the breath of life into Adam Arishon. Okay, and so when it says here that their face was upward, was upward, so it means their nose, which is the place of the Ruach Chaim, the breath of life, their breath, their wind, the spirit of life that they draw to themselves, these dead people of the desert, right? The generation that died in the desert, the Rishaim, those drunkards that are red from the redness of Esav, those people, their face is upward. The ruach that they draw, this spirit, this energy, this breath that fulfills all of their needs and all of their wishes are met, is upward. It's extremely well pronounced, and it's extremely loud, and it looks so flashy. We were speaking about the celebrities, that live their life like who knows what, but they have all this tremendous success. Where is that coming from? So Rabbi Nachman describes it as the wind of a storm. The wind of a storm is extremely well pronounced, very loud, very flashy, and powerful. And anyone that looks at it at the time, anyone that sees that wind, hears that wind, experiences that wind at the time of the storm, is afraid. Oh my goodness, this is the most powerful thing around, right? But as soon as the storm subsides, there's nothing left to that wind. There's nothing left to it. So it's completely temporary. But that's what we see over here. Hakarat penehem, the penehem lemala. Their face, which represents the wind that they draw from, the spirit that they draw from, the way they draw the breath of life, from the side of Achoraim, from the indirect, from the side of concealment, from the side of Klippa, is tremendously powerful. It's lemala. It's overpowering. It's upward. But it's temporary. And the knee of one of them was raised up. Okay, so Rabbi Nachman says this is also alluding the fact that his knee, these people, his knee was raised up, is also alluding to the fact of how great his success was. His success was so pronounced and so loud and so flashy. Why? So we know that there's a pasuk in Yeshayahu that says about how the person who has a person who is lacking, who is an unsuccessful person is described as someone who has weak knees, knees that give away. When a person has knees that give away, that's describing a person who is unsuccessful. He's not able to stand on his feet. Okay. On the other hand, we see the pasuk in the Torah that describes Korach. Korach was tremendously wealthy, and it says over there, "V'et kol hayikum asher beraglehem." Okay, all of their tremendous wealth and all their assets that were at their feet was all swallowed up together with them. So Rabbi Nachman brings a proof from here in a few places in the Likutei Moharan that the wealth that a person has, the assets that a person's own, the physical assets, the gashmiut, is what gives a person, it's an aspect of feet. It's what stands a person on his feet. So on the other hand, when a person is unsuccessful, he has knees that buckle, knees that give away. He cannot stand on his own 2 feet. And that's the weak knees, the birkaim koshlot. But the fact that here it's speaking about this, the Rishayim, that his knee was raised up, is the opposite. It's saying that he was tremendously successful. It's showing how successful he was. That's what it's indicating. It's his tremendous is good fortune. And the taya, the merchant, what's that alluding to? What is that hinting to? That's hinting to the tzaddik. The tzaddik is considered a merchant. Okay? Hainu tzaddik shenika taya, כמו שפירוש רבינו שמו בכל מקום סוחר ישמעאל, וסוחר הוא בחינת הרוח, כמו שכתוב סובב סובב הולך הרוח. והיינו הצדיק שמקבל הרוח מהקדושה. So Rabbi Nachman, in every place that he speaks about this Arab merchant, he always speaks about how the Rabbeinu Shmuel, the Rashbam, translates the Arab merchant as the Socher Yishmael, which is exactly that translation, which means Socher is a merchant, Yishmael is Arab, but Rabbi Nachman always says that it alludes to a tzaddik. And different places he shows how that alludes to a tzaddik in different ways. One of them is the fact that Yishmael is that Hashem will listen. Hashem will listen to my prayer. And the tzaddik is the one that causes all the prayers to be answered and all the prayers to be heard. But here he's also pointing out the fact that socher, a merchant, why is the word in the word in Aramaic for a merchant is socher, and the word in Aramaic for going around is also the word socher. Sechor is also the same letters as socher. Sechor means around, going around. And the reason why a merchant is called socher is because that's what he does. He goes around from place to place trying to sell his goods, buying and selling and buying and selling. That's what a merchant is. And that's why he's called a socher. But here Rabbi Nachman references the fact that he's called a socher, that's alluding to this ruach. Because the ruach we spoke about yesterday is the surrounding light. Okay, that's the avir or yud, that's what we spoke about yesterday, that it's the surrounding light. And so this Socher Yishmael is referring to the tzaddik that is receiving this ruach, this breath of Hashem, this surrounding light. He's receiving it from Hashem, from the side of holiness. Okay, וסוחר הוא בחינת הרוח, כמו שכתוב סובב סובב הולך הרוח. והיינו הצדיק שמקבל הרוח מהקדושה, וזהו סוחר ישמעאל, השם כי שמע השם אל עונייך. כי הצדיק שומע כל ההנחות של הדבקים בו, כי ממנו תוצאות חיים לכל אחד, כי הוא איש אשר רוח בו כנר. So the fact that the tzaddik is socher means goes around, is because he receives this ruach, this wind that's called the surrounding, yes? And he's also called Yishmael. Yishmael, why was Yishmael called Yishmael? Right, the pasuk in Bereshit, the Malach tells Hagar to name him Yishmael, Ki shama Hashem el onyech, because Hashem has heard all of your pain, right? All of your affliction. So Yishmael is about hearing the pain of those that are praying. That's what the name Ishmael came from. In the same way, says Rabbi Nachman, the tzaddik hears all of the sighs of everyone that is connected to him. When you're connected to a tzaddik, the tzaddik hears the sigh. You're sighing. He hears what you're lacking. The sighing comes from the lack, what you're missing, when you're experiencing the deficiency in a certain situation, an adversity, whatever it is that you're experiencing, a difficulty, a lack, a void, and you sigh. The tzaddik hears that. And when he hears that, he draws to you from that Ruach Chaim, from the breath of Hashem that is found in the Torah, and he draws to you that breath of Hashem, that breath of life, to fulfill all of your wishes. So that's why he's called Socher Ishmael, because he hears the sighs of those that are connected to him, and he draws from this breath, the Socher, the surrounding light, he draws it to those that are connected to him in order to fulfill their wishes. So that Arab merchant, which now we just said alludes to the tzaddik, Ki Rachiv Gamla, he went under the knee. He went under the knee of this dead body, Ki Rachiv Gamla, as he was riding his camel. What is that alluding to? Bechinat Gomel Nafsho Ish Chassid. So Gamla, the camel, it alludes to the Chesed, kindness. Okay, and you also see that in the Gemara in Brachot. There's a parak in Masechet Brachot that speaks about all the different things that a person can see in their dream. And what does that allude to? What is that hinting to? What is that showing a person? So Gamal represents Chesed. It represents kindness. There's also another Gemara that says Gamlanin Chasidim. Anyways, the point is that Gamal is also like the word Gimel, like the letter Gimel. The letter Gimel in the Aleph Bet sounds like Gamal. And the letter Gimel in the Aleph Bet and the actual word for camel is referring to chesed, because the word for doing kindness to someone else in Hebrew is gomel chasadim. Gomel chasadim is to do kindness to others. Ligmol chasadim, to give to others kindness, to give kindness to others. So someone who is kind is gomel chasadim, and that's why the letter Gimel represents also kindness. If the Gemara in Shabbat, at the end of Shabbat, speaks about what the letters of the Aleph Bet are alluding to. And the Gimel represents this kindness, Gomel Dalim. Gimel Dalet, Gomel Dalim is doing kindness to the poor, to the needy. So Gimel and Gomel and Gamal, the camel, all represents kindness. So the fact that this tzaddik is he is riding the camel, it's alluding to the fact that he is the rabbi of Chesed. Rav Chesed, as we saw earlier in the Torah, the word from the 13 midot of Hashem, the 13 attributes of compassion, of Hashem's divine compassion. The Rav Chesed, we said, is alluding to this tzaddik, that he is the rabbi on the side of holiness. He is the rabbi on the side of Chesed, kindness. He is the rabbi of the white talit. Okay, we had the red talit, which is the Rav of Din, the Rav of the Klippa, the Rav of Esav, and on the other side, on the side of holiness, we have the Rav Chesed. And Chesed is represented by the color white, the white talit, Rav Chesed. And so that's why he is riding a camel, because the camel represents the Chesed. And this is the Rav of Chesed, the Rav of kindness. Uzkif rumcha, his spear was upright and stretched out. Romach ubechinat ruach mem. What is the spear alluding to? The word for spear is romach. And the word romach, meaning spear, is also the same letters that make up another word. It makes up the word ruach mem. Romach is the same letters as ruach, which is the spirit, the breath, and the letter mem. Okay, what does that mean? So, bechinat veruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim, haynu haTorah shenitna lemem yom, shesham haruach chaim kanal, כלומר שהצדיק היה לו בחינת הרוח שמקבל מהתורה כנ"ל, ועם כל זה נכי תחות ברכי תחת הצלחת הרשע, בחינת קבל הרשע, צדיק ממנו. So he says that this tzaddik, that he is the Rav Chesed, and he had the spear we said is ruach mem, the breath, the spirit of mem. What is that alluding to? The spirit of mem is referring to the breath of life from the side of holiness. The breath of life which is found in the Torah, like it says in the Zohar, in Bereshit, it says, "Veruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim." The Spirit of Hashem is floating. Its presence was upon the water. The water, says the Zohar, is referring to the Torah. That the Spirit of Hashem, the Ruach Elohim, the breath of life, is in the Torah. And so this tzaddik has this breath of life which is in the Torah. The Torah is the mem. The Torah is the 40. Like the Gemara says, the Torah was given to us lemem yom. 40 days. Moshe Rabbeinu had to go up 40 days to receive the Torah and bring it back down to Am Yisrael. 40 days that he learned with the Kadosh Baruch Hu the Torah and then brought it down to Am Yisrael. So the Torah was given to us in 40 days. These represent the 40 days of how a child, the beginning, when a child is conceived. So from the beginning of conception until the body, the first phase of the form of the baby in the fetus, in the mother being formed, the first phase of the whole baby being formed takes 40 days, the Gemara says. Yetzirat Tavlat. And that's why the Torah, which is our birth in the spiritual realm, also took 40 days in order for that form to be given over to Moshe Rabbeinu, and then afterwards he can come and give it to us and develop it, just like a child, the baby is developed, and the rest of the time of the pregnancy is developed until it's able to be born as a full child, a full baby, right? In the same way, the Torah, the first phase, as it was given over, the form of it that was given over to Moshe, took 40 days. So that's the 40 that is representing the Torah. And the Ruach Mem, the spear that is called Romach, which is the same letters as Ruach Mem, the breath, the spirit of Mem, it's the spirit and the breath of Hashem, which is found in the Torah, which is the Mem. The 40 days was given to us in 40 days. And even though, says Rabbi Nachman, that this tzaddik, he is the Rav of Chesed, he is riding a camel, he's the Rav of Chesed, the Rav of kindness, okay, from the side of holiness. And even though he is connected to and he's drawing from the breath of life, the breath of Hashem, which is found in the Torah, right? The Romach, the spear, that's what it's alluding to. Still, Nachit Techot Birke. He went under the knee of the sinners, of the Rishaim. What does that represent? That represents the fact that sometimes you see a tzaddik and he's connected to Hashem and he's the Rav of the side of holiness, and still he's not able to overcome the Rasha. He's not able to overcome the Rasha, and like the pasuk says, "Kevala rasha tzadik mimenu," that the wicked man devours the tzaddik that is greater than he. And earlier in the Torah, we spoke about how the difference is, and the reason why that is because in order for the tzaddik to overcome the Rasha, he needs to be a tzaddik gamor. He needs to be a complete tzaddik. He needs to be a tzaddik that has completely rid himself from any negativity in the four elements, the four expressions of the midot, the four source for expression of all the midot in himself. He is completely immune to the negativity on the outside. He's completely immune to the negativity of the Rasha because he has completely purified himself from any negativity in his own midot. And that's the tzaddik gamor, that only he has the ability and the power to overcome the Rasha. But this one that we're going to speak about in this story now, that we're speaking about in this story now with Rabbi Bar Bechana, this tzaddik is one that is not complete. He's not a tzaddik gamor, and that's why with all of the tremendous these tremendous power that he has, that he's the Rav of Chesed, and that he is as we said, that he's riding the camel, and that he has the spear, which represents that he's connected to and drawing from the spirit of Hashem, the breath of Hashem in the Torah. Still, he only got under the knee. The knee represents, we said, the hatzlacha, the success. He only got under the success of the Rasha. The Rasha was able to overpower him. And so we're going to see how the rest of the Torah is hinted to in this story in our next year, Be'ezrat Hashem.